really interesting event, just analyzing what went wrong in Texas and why they had the, how they could have been better prepared to handle the situation, and just given like a more in-depth dive of what went on there. June, we'll do a virtual award ceremony. We'll present scholarships and awards. So that'll be a fun event. Usually that's in person. This year, it probably will not be, but we're hoping that we'll be back in person next year. And then events that we're looking to develop for the fall of next year, we'll take the summer off a couple of months, and then starting back in August, we'll start planning some events. We're looking at doing things like some financing for energy efficiency projects, a BAS tour. We usually do a CalISO trip to see the CalISO. We're looking to do an industry update and networking workshop. That'll be targeted towards students and people, young or early to mid-career, on how to network yourself and the status of the industry, where it's going, and what to look for, and how the industry is progressing. We also generally do an Oktoberfest, which we haven't put on here, but a lot of good events for the fall coming up too. Can you go next slide, Nishant? This is a slide just going over the benefits of joining AEE. There's the education and training and networking, certifications, conferences. These events, there's just a plethora of reasons and a lot of good things that come from joining AEE. So if you're not a member, we'd love to have you join. Next slide. This is the AEE Board of Directors. I'm the president, the current president. Nishant is our vice president. Fred is acting secretary. Brian Lana is the treasurer, and both Brian Tanahashi and Tim Clark were past presidents, and Heather is a member at large. So that's your board. Next slide. And I will pass it over to you, Nishant. So thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Fred, do you want to speak about this?
Yeah, sure. So we just wanted to let everybody know that we've recently undergone a refresh of our website that we're pretty excited about. I think we've improved a lot of the features. So I just wanted to give a couple slides here, a quick overview of what you can look for if you visit our website. So first off, it's accessible from both aenorcal.org and norcalaee.org. And what you're seeing here is a shot of the homepage. So if you see the Tower Bridge in the background, you know that you're seeing the new website. You want to hit the next slide, Nishant? One of the things, I think probably the biggest new feature that I'm excited about is a real intuitive interface that will show both our upcoming events as well as our past events. So this is a quick shot of what if you slide down on the homepage, you'll see some of the upcoming events, obviously today with Adam here, and then the next couple, both chapter events and then national events will be listed as well. Next slide. A couple of other links right there on the homepage are, links to the become a member of AEE. Events will take you to the main events page where you can scroll through both past and future. And then leadership, the leadership page just gives you a sense of, again, the AEE chapter board that we just went over, and a little bit of background for those of us that are on the board. Go ahead. These are a few of the past events that we've had. So if you scroll down on the homepage toward the very bottom, there's a slider that'll go back and forth here, kind of rotating through some of the previous projects, previous presentations that we've done, previous events. And actually from those, if you were to click on one of these, you can access a video of any of the events right there from our website now, rather than having to go find the link on YouTube. Next slide. And then I think finally, this is just the bottom of the homepage has got some of the quick links, how to contact us, sign up for the main AEE newsletter, and a couple of the other resources that are available. So we're excited. Hope you get a chance to take a look around, watch some of the old events if you weren't able to see those. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out at the contact email address that's shown there at the bottom. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Fred.
Hey, Nishant, excuse me. Nishant, this is Tim Clark. Fred, I think done an excellent job of creating this website. Websites are pretty ubiquitous these days. Everybody's got one, but you don't really know what goes into building one and creating one, and the skills that it took to build one out. But Fred has picked this up in the last couple of months. He volunteered, and that's just the kind of thing that I think is excellent. It gave Fred a chance to learn a new skill, stretch his talents, and he's really proven to have done a fine job here. So just kind of a virtual round of applause here for our waits as he's created this website for us. Thank you, Fred.
Yep, thanks so much, Fred.
Of course,
Yeah, you have
it was
done a
fun. I
wonderful
enjoyed
job.
it.
Thanks, Fred.
I appreciate it.
All right, moving on to the next slide. So welcome everyone. Put our hands together for Adam, Director of Customer Solutions at Recurve. Recurve is a cutting-edge firm focused on creating carbon-free energy grid by integrating behind-the-meter demand flexibility resources. Well, Adam has, over the years, has displayed leadership and experience connecting research and analytics to perform planning, developing building-level customer targeting strategies, utilizing smart meters to connect energy efficiency and demand-side programs. Adam is a Ph.D. in physics from the University of Colorado Boulder, go Buffs, and a postdoctoral fellow from Sandia National Labs, and has published more than 30 articles in scientific journals that has set the foundation for next generation of climate technologies. Truly, he's a thought leader for energy efficiency. And with that, the floor is yours, Adam.
Well, thanks, Nishant. I really appreciate it. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. We can get started. So 1 second.
Sure.
And if folks can just confirm that in a moment they can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I just want to say to start off, thanks for having me. I'm excited to join. I was saying earlier that I appreciate the more technical audience here. I also really appreciate some of the focus that AEE has on students and on career development. Those are things that I'm also very passionate about. And, it makes me reflect on my own career a bit and some of the times that, I had mentors that reached out to me and kind of set me on the course that I'm on today. And so I appreciate the focus that AEE has on that. It's the biggest influence anybody can ever have is, on others, and that's how you multiply, your outcomes in life. So I just want to acknowledge that. So, I'm going to talk about, an exciting topic, flexibility as a resource. But I also want to talk some about the challenges of this, and because that's what's in front of us. We have problems that we really have to solve here. It's not going to be easy. And I've been involved in energy for a long time, dating back to when I became a graduate student. My PhD work was really focused on energy related technologies, specifically around biofuels at the time. So I did a lot of chemical physics research into biofuels for new engines that can be carbon neutral and more efficient, and the utilizing biofuels for natural cycles of CO2 into the atmosphere, back into plants, back into the atmosphere, so it could be burned but in a carbon neutral kind of way. And that got me involved in thinking about climate change and really how we can solve for some of these global issues that are facing us as a civilization, really. And that ultimately led me to PG&E because while I was excited about doing academic research, I was more excited about the prospect of changing things for the better with some hands-on work. And I saw PG&E as a leader in energy efficiency. I think that they still are, but this is an industry that needs to be modernized. I don't think it's a secret that the demand side solutions that are out there are not keeping pace and are not being delivered at the scale that we ultimately need in order to integrate more renewables and decarbonize the grid as quickly as we need to. So I don't have all of the answers. I don't claim to have all of the answers. But what I at least can do is help illustrate some of these issues and talk about some potential solutions here and some prospects that I'm excited about, but we're all gonna have to work together to get there. So again, thanks for having me, and I'll just dive in. So, who is Recurve? I think Nishant did a good job introducing us as a company, but I really view us as a company dedicated to bringing research and data analytics to the forefront of decision-making in the demand-side energy world. And there is a lot of low-hanging fruit here. It's not like this is an arena that is optimized and we're trying to squeeze out the last 0.25% on a stock price. What we're really trying to do is say, this is an industry that typically hasn't really utilized big data in any kind of cohesive way. We need to bring that to the table because data is going to unlock where the opportunity is, and it's going to be able to demonstrate to the entire energy world, including the procurement side of the house, that demand side resources can be reliable, can be counted on, and can be optimized for the grid as it exists today, but also as it will hopefully exist in the future. So we're really trying to be that glue that brings data and analytics in an actionable way, in a timely way, to the decision-making processes about where we go with demand-side resources, and hopefully helps scale demand-side resources. So today's energy priorities are really these two things. If you distill it down, at least this is what I can surmise. We've got decarbonization and we have affordability. And you could probably also put resiliency and reliability in here. But if you look at the long term, we have to decarbonize the grid. We have to decarbonize buildings in general. It's not just the electric grid, but it's, the electric grid is going to be the focal point of that if we can electrify in building end uses, and if we can electrify transportation. But this is only going to work if it's affordable. We can't succeed in decarbonization if it breaks the bank for ratepayers. We're already starting to see rates go up in places where there is grid instability that's being brought forward by heavy penetration of renewables and things like very dramatic duck curves. So we have to find a way to do this in a way that's affordable. Now, when you look at decarbonization, there's really a couple main aspects of this when it comes to building and grid decarbonization. One is renewable energy. We need more renewable energy. We need more carbon-free resources. And the other aspect of it is decarbonizing transportation and decarbonizing via electrification of buildings. So this is sort of the fundamental approach, and it brings everything again back to the electric grid. And when you look at these three things together, renewables, electrification, and affordability, there's one sort of common solution, which is demand flexibility. You can't effectively, at this point in time, without massive storage resources, affordably decarbonize the grid. And storage itself is expensive, as we all know, especially when you're talking about potentially building like peak storage facilities to take care of what peak natural gas power plants are currently serving. So, we really need demand flexibility in order to get, 60, 70, 80% decarbonized, but especially 90, 100% decarbonized eventually. You can't really do it with supply side solutions alone, even when you're talking about storage. So what do we really mean by demand flexibility? We mean the ability for the grid itself via the individual meters that are on that grid to shed load, to shift load, to save energy at the right times in the right places, such that when we have a missed forecast for renewable resources, or when we have a very steep evening ramp in places that have like a duck curve, that we're able to bend the demand side so that we can stay carbon neutral during those times, or stay zero carbon during those times. Now, this is not a problem for tomorrow. This is a problem for 5 years ago. We just haven't solved it. And this is the grid when you don't have enough demand flexibility. This is what we're already seeing. So the figure on the left is showing a CAISO price map in the real-time market. This happened to be on March 23rd. I believe this was 2019 at 1:15 p.m. But this is just an example. This kind of thing happens quite often in the mild shoulder months when you have excess renewable generation that doesn't have anywhere to go. If you've been reading newspapers, you don't have to go to scientific publications to figure this out. If you've been reading the newspaper, you probably know that there are a bunch of times throughout the year when California is literally paying Arizona, Nevada to take electrons off of our grid. And the reason that we're paying them to do so is it's actually more expensive to put them in the ground with the way that these solar contracts work. It costs money to curtail solar. So every dot on that grid is blue. Every dot is representing a price per megawatt hour of -$50 or less. So, every dot on that grid across not only California, but basically into Nevada, into, other regions that feed into the CAISO, there's an overgeneration of renewable resources with nowhere to go. Again, this is something that storage will hopefully help to solve. But if we had more demand flexibility, then we could be shifting load onto those midday time periods where we can put those electrons to use and then subsequently shave the peak later on because we've already done those functions that need to be accomplished. And this is just one example. The figure on the right is showing a situation where you have kind of a grid in chaos, and you have some areas of the grid that are operating fairly normally with prices around $30 to $50 a megawatt hour. But then you also have a bunch of negative pricing shown in blue. And then you have pockets of very, very high pricing of 200, 300, maybe more dollars per megawatt hour shown in red. So this is just to say that not everything across the grid is consistent. There's a real need for focused flexibility in locations that are experiencing different grid situations. So, all in all, in 2020, California curtailed 1.6 terawatt hours of renewables, and that number is growing every year. I think in 2019, we didn't quite hit a terawatt hour. So just year over year, we've gone from less than a terawatt hour to 1.6 terawatt hours of renewables curtailment. That's real money. That's real dollars coming out of ratepayers' pockets that are going into the ground along with those electrons. And it's not just negative pricing events or like pockets on the grid. There are also times where the grid is in emergency situations. And we saw this with the blackouts that caused headlines in the New York Times that occurred last summer. So this is, again, the California grid. And I'm talking about California really because it's not some, California is just a little bit ahead of where a lot of other places are. I think other areas around the country, including Colorado, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, there's a real duck curve or some other kind of animal that's showing up on the grid. But California has really made a push for much longer at this point in time. So the lessons we're learning from California don't have to illustrate some dystopian future. This is where we can get ahead across the country. But with the focus being in California, we are dealing with grid emergencies that are happening more frequently. And this is just an example of where we're not talking $100, $200 a megawatt hour. We're talking $1,000 or more a megawatt hour across the entire grid in California. And this is something that caused blackouts too. So there's a safety concern, there's an economic concern that goes well beyond just what are we paying for a megawatt hour. This is where demand flexibility could have a major, major impact on our ability to keep the grid reliable and to save ratepayers a lot of money that can then go into actually decarbonizing the grid. So, this is just some examples of where a lack of demand flexibility has left us in this situation where we've really got to ramp up quickly to keep pace with what we can now do on the renewable energy front, but we are yet to be able to do on the storage front. And what is one of the things that's holding us back? You know, we can point to the fact that like energy efficiency has been around a long time, and it's been a reliable resource in a lot of those kinds of things, and it's been a success. And I think those things are all true. But when you look at the way that markets work, the way that economics works, you know, you go to the grocery store, you buy whatever this lady's buying, and you weigh it, and it's X number of pounds. We don't have arguments about that. We don't go to the cash register and say, well, I measured this differently than you measured it. I actually owe you this. You know, that's not a conversation. It's a laughable notion, right? Same thing with like gasoline. You go to the gas station. We're not arguing over what a gallon is. You install solar on a rooftop. You know exactly what the output of that solar PV system is. You can meter it directly. But energy efficiency doesn't work that way, right? We're trying to do something different. We're fundamentally measuring the lack of existence of something. But we've always, I think, collectively said that as though it was the end of the story. And what I want to suggest today is this doesn't have to be the case. We absolutely can come to a weights and measures for energy efficiency and other demand side resources that work very similarly to how we measure, you know, we measure candy at the grocery store, or we pump gas into our gas tank. And, you know, this is the consequence of not having a standard weights and measures. Energy efficiency in many jurisdictions is the first in the loading order resource, and as many studies show, is still to this day the most cost-effective resource that we can be tapping into to solve our decarbonization and grid issues. So how is it that when you have first in the order loading order, you know, for energy efficiency, you have 100% carbon-free targets, you have legislative goals, including SB 350 in California that mandates a doubling of energy efficiency by 2030, and you have grid instability that energy efficiency and other demand-side resources can help solve. And then on top of all of that, you have climate change, you know, as an existential threat. How is it in that set of circumstances that the energy efficiency budget in the United States is less than 1% of energy spending? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you think about what it takes to compete in a market, which is where the opportunity is, you need something beyond deemed savings, where you've done your best, you've done a good engineering analysis, but when you look at the evaluation that comes a year or two or three down the road, we've all seen instances, many instances, of where the evaluation finds a very, very different answer. And we wind up in this gray area where nobody can really tell you what the program's impact was, even if you're just measuring annual savings. But what the grid needs is to know what the impact is much faster and on an hourly basis. So this is where we're left if we don't have a way to accomplish that people can shake hands on. So this is really where Recurve has put a lot of our effort as a company and produced resources that can be used not just by us, but by anybody who wants to put in the time and the effort. So, you know, to scale demand flexibility resources, we need markets, and markets need standards. So these are some of the efforts that we've undertaken in order to create these kinds of standards. And what we are hoping is that they can be adopted in a more widespread way, that people can say, okay, you know, you're using these methods with this code base, I can verify it in these ways, and we can shake hands that this is the way the program is going to be measured. It's going to require this data, and we can all see it together as the program is unfolding, as opposed to all sort of taking it on faith that the program is delivering what we're estimating, and then finding out later whether it did or didn't via an evaluation that we may or may not agree with. So a couple of these I would point to. CalTrack is a set of methods for looking at individual meter-based savings. So if I participate in an energy efficiency program, then the CalTrack methods can be applied to, you know, this is a set of models that are developed to look at either the daily or the monthly impacts of that program, or another set of methods to look specifically at the hourly impacts. And those methods were developed in an open stakeholder process with a lot of input from experts. And there's also the OpenEE meter, which implements the Caltrack methods. This is the Python code base that you can download on your computer today, and I'll provide some resources later in the conversation where you can actually go and you can look directly at the code, you can download it, you can run it yourself. And then there's the Open Grid meter, which I'll talk a little bit about later, which looks at comparison groups. It develops comparison groups, does sampling for comparison groups. With COVID, that's a very important thing now that there is really a lack of normalcy in energy usage patterns as buildings are shut down and brought back online with COVID restrictions. And then there's the need to take kWh and therms that we're saving in our programs and assign a dollar value to them and assign a GHG value to them. Making that connection is usually in the realm of cost effectiveness calculations that have typically been the subject of subject matter experts who know how to run these tools and run the code around cost effectiveness. But we really need to kind of take the lid off of that. And that's actually the webinar I was coming from right before this one. We were presenting the Flex Value open source code base that anybody can go download and run themselves. And again, I'll provide a link to this where you can access this code and run it yourself if you would like. So this, in our minds, is what we need to do as an industry we have to get past the arguments over how much we're saving and what the methods are. And I've got like my method, you like your method, let's agree to disagree. We have to get past that. We have to get to a situation where the methods we can shake hands on and we can move forward, understanding that they're not perfect. The Caltrack methods are not perfect, but at least there's a stakeholder process that people can engage in if people want to suggest improvements to those methods. And there's a working group of stakeholders that can weigh in and say, this is a good idea, or no, this isn't a good idea. But to really consolidate some of the methodological work into a set of tools, a set of methods, a set of code that people can say, okay, this is where we're at, and we can take our programs into this kind of environment. And then we can go to the procurement side of the house and say, this is what we're delivering. And we can do that in a time frame that's relevant for the decisions that need to be made for the grid on any given day. So this is all leading to, if you have methods and you have open source code and that kind of thing that enable markets, then what do those markets actually look like? So that's all just laying the foundation. You know, markets don't magically appear. The idea is to put forward a value proposition that is superior than the one that was previously there. And pay for performance is one way to do that. Now, California in 2015 passed a law, AB 802, that said existing conditions baselines are now the default. And what that means is if you have a building that's in a certain state with a certain set of equipment, you can measure savings from the replacement of that equipment, and the baseline or the initial state that is part of your calculation is that existing state of the building before your program. Now, this is a big deal because that means the meter-based change in energy consumption is relevant for that baseline. Previously, the law was what was called code baseline or industry standard practice baseline. You'll hear that term as well. And I'm sure many on this call have heard that term and maybe even done some of these calculations yourselves. That's the idea that, well, my air conditioner broke down. I need to buy a new air conditioner. That old air conditioner, which may be 15, 20 years old at this point, is not a relevant baseline, because if I were to go to the store and buy a new air conditioner, I wouldn't be even able to buy that previous version of the air conditioner. I would be by default buying an air conditioner that is more efficient than that older model. So when we do energy efficiency calculations, we need to focus on that incremental savings that we get by purchasing a yet more efficient air conditioner versus the code minimum or the industry standard practice. So that's a well-intentioned policy, but what it has led to over time is a lack of is putting energy efficiency in a little bit of a bubble where we have no way of like really truly demonstrating and metering in a way I talked about earlier, what the changes in energy consumption are at a building level or at a portfolio level. So pay for performance was established as a program model in California on the back of AB 802, which again established existing conditions baselines and made meter-based savings a valid approach to making savings claims that were acknowledged in California. So when you can do this, you can say, okay, look, we're going to measure savings at the meter. We can do that over the course of the program. We don't have to wait a long time. You know, the minute that program starts to get projects enrolled, we can start to measure the savings of those projects using these open source and standardized methods. And by doing so, we can show all parties that are involved, the utility, the implementer, the contractor, whomever it may be, we can show them the savings that are being accrued while there is still a live program that can be optimized. And that gives a lot of power to these implementers to go after the kinds of things within buildings that they may have had to ignore previously because they may not have been cost effective. You know, when you can look at the meter and gauge savings, you can look for inefficiencies that you may not have a work paper for, you may not have a way to make a deemed savings claim. And so you say, okay, look, the deal is that you, by measuring savings at the meter, there's a lot more that opens up to you as a program implementer. You can save energy where there's a genuine opportunity to save energy, but the accountability is with you as well, because we're going to be making a measurement of your savings, and there is a dollar value tied to that that previously you haven't had to risk. So it shifts some of the risk in the program away from the ratepayer, who takes all of the risk in a deemed savings program. You know, if a deemed savings program doesn't work out, the incentives still get paid, and the ratepayer bears 100% of the burden of the risk. In a pay for performance program, you can say, because we can measure savings at the meter across your whole portfolio, we can also pay you on those results. And if those results don't materialize, sorry, you're out of luck. But the upside is you have so much more open in your program, and you have, you know, much greater flexibility. And if you can get beyond the deemed savings, and if you listen to a lot of implementers, they'll tell you they're consistently beyond the deemed savings. If you can get beyond the deemed savings and you can genuinely do that, then you can be rewarded for that. So it's a risk reward. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this risk reward, because there is some risk in a meter-based pay for performance program, like a demand flexibility type of an approach where you're measuring at the meter. There are some strategies to succeed, and there's also some ways that we've seen people struggle. So the first thing I want to say is just to take a step back. Let's take ourselves collectively outside of the energy efficiency space. And let's just think for a minute about like finances, because actually there's an analogy here that is really, really strong that I want to draw, but it actually helps to like take ourselves out of energy efficiency for a minute. So I just looked up the other week the percent change for every single stock in 2020 in the S&P 500. And this is what that portfolio looked like. That dotted vertical bar is the average percent change in a stock price in the S&P 500 in 2020. And so you can see, you know, on average, there was maybe a 6 or 7 or 8% increase in stock value, but there was a wide distribution of results. So a couple rhetorical questions. You know, question one, would you put your life savings into a random stock? Or even maybe 2 or 3 of these stocks? Would you take your life savings and would you be comfortable putting them into a random stock? Well, unless you're a pretty heavy gambler, I think the answer for most people would be no. You know, if I take my money and I put it into a random stock, I might be losing 50% of it just in the year alone, according to how some of these stocks have performed. But another question is, would you distribute your life savings across the entire portfolio of these stocks? And to me, the answer is yes, right? I mean, you'd be crazy not to. unless you're going to bury your money in the backyard. So this is very analogous to energy efficiency portfolio. And what I'm showing you is the actual results from a portfolio that we've measured fairly recently. This is PG&E's Advanced Home Upgrade Program. So this is a program that does residential energy efficiency retrofits. It does air sealing, building insulation, replaces the air conditioner, those kinds of things. And you can see that, you know, there's quite a bit of distribution, there's quite a bit of variability in the individual outcomes that customers experience. And this isn't surprising when you think about it. I mean, there's a lot going on within any given household. There's kids going off to college. There's, you know, new babies being born. There's people who get a new, you know, TV or a new entertainment system, or, you know, get a dishwasher for the first time, or, you know, install LEDs that are unrelated to the program. And we are used to, in energy efficiency, thinking about savings as like a point estimate. You know, everybody who gets this measure gets this savings. But when you look at the meter, you're in that measurement incorporating all of this variability into that measurement. So when you look at any one meter, even though they may be using more energy, they may very well have a positive impact from the program. But for every meter like that, there's another meter where the natural decrease in energy consumption unrelated to the program, so the savings aren't attributable exclusively to the program. So for everybody over here, you have somebody over here, and it kind of balances out. Now, the goal of an energy efficiency portfolio has to be to move that distribution of results into the positive savings territory as much as possible. And that's what successful programs can do. So when you're looking at the Advanced Home Upgrade Program, you know, the average customer is saving more than a megawatt hour a year, even though the distribution is pretty wide. And so 1/3 of the projects have negative savings, but the average savings is more than a megawatt hour a year. So we have to start thinking about portfolios. You know, this markets are driven by portfolios. You know, investment is driven by portfolio. Same thing with demand flexibility and energy efficiency. We have to be talking about portfolios that are big enough to manage, that are big enough to classify, to treat as assets, that can deliver savings with confidence, that you can take into a market and you can bid into a market. That's the name of the game. So what's the recipe for success in a population? I'm calling this population INMEC. This is basically the term that means an aggregated INMEC portfolio. So number one, you know, we want to identify customers with high savings potential. And I'm going to talk more about this point, so I'll just leave it for now. But we need to be more proactive about who we recruit into our program. There's a big opportunity there. Number two, tailor inventions to customer needs. So right now, the way that many energy efficiency programs operate is every single customer that participates, regardless of their unique set of circumstances, receives the same set of interventions. That's not the way it has to be. We can absolutely have programs that are more flexible where there are individual customer opportunities for energy savings. So maybe I have an opportunity because I have an old refrigerator, but my neighbor has an opportunity because they have incandescent lighting. We need to be more eyes open when we have a customer engaged to find where the opportunity exists. And I think the implementers who are going to succeed in these kinds of programs are going to be able to make that connection. It's not the way businesses are structured right now. That's a problem, you know, and that's something that we have to sort of struggle through. We have to redevelop our business models around some of these newer concepts. Three, you know, we want to deliver deeper savings and peak load reduction. So when you're measuring savings at the meter, this is just a signal to noise issue. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you guys that if I have very, very small savings, it's harder to pick that out of a noisy background. You want a high degree of confidence in what you're measuring, and you can get that in part by delivering deeper savings. You want to aggregate many projects. That's just what I talked about with the stock analogy. And then you want to make sure that M&V results, you know, what you're actually being judged on is available in real time through the program. You don't want to have to wait months or even, you know, years to find out well, did my program succeed? A program is something to be, M&V is something that can be a program management tool. It can be embedded as part of the program. It doesn't have to be something that is after the fact. So here's the most important thing I will tell you today. Most deemed programs are really not built to succeed as INMEC programs, as meter-based programs. Most deemed programs, when plugged in to a meter-based model for M&V, don't do that well. And part of the reason is because they are tripping over some of these things, the how to fail bullet points in population index. So number one, it's just like door-to-door program sales. It's just kind of like the opposite of what I was talking about earlier. It's, I can do these 3 measures. Every customer is going to get these 3 measures regardless. And I'm going to go door-to-door because that's how I can get maximal program recruitment and cash in on deemed incentives. So, you know, door-to-door program sales, same measures for every customer, mostly light touch projects, small portfolios, you know, portfolios of 10, 15, 20 projects, and, you know, not tracking things in real time. So just finding out later that, oh my gosh, you know, if only we would have known and had these results during the program, we would have been able to adjust course in real time. So I want to come back to customer targeting, because this is one of the critical riddles I think that we have to solve. And I say it's a riddle because I think that we've done a lot of research and we've seen many, many instances where we know which customers offer high savings potential. And I'm showing an example again here from Advanced Home Upgrade. You may remember that the average savings for this program was about 1 megawatt hour. But when we look at customers that had high summer peaks, then we find that, you know, 1/3 of the customers have about 3x the savings. And the average savings from customers with usage patterns that we know ahead of time drove most of the savings in this program. That was, you know, so we can tell you a portfolio of customers based on their pre-consumption data, their pre-program usage data, which customers can benefit 2-3x customers that don't meet those types of usage characteristics. So we know how to do customer targeting. We know how to look at usage patterns, find the customers that stand to benefit the most in the program, but we have yet to solve the marketing and the business model riddle. You know, how do you get those customers engaged? A lot of programs right now are struggling with customer recruitment in general, much less targeting from within a smaller population. But we know the customers that actually offer the opportunity for higher savings. And we really need to solve this because not every customer has the opportunity to save energy in a program. Not every customer is going to drive cost-effective savings. And we know ahead of time, a lot of times, which customers will and which customers won't. So we really need to find the next generation of customer engagement to get these folks who do have an opportunity themselves for even benefiting and saving a lot on their bill, but who also can drive the greatest grid benefits for the broader rate base, how to get them engaged and enrolled in these programs. So I just want to keep talking a little bit about customer targeting, because this is really something that can make a difference if we can solve this riddle, like I said. So again, sticking with the Advanced Home Upgrade program, if we look at the bottom 40% of customers according to their summer peak megawatt hour usage, again, pre-program, so this is pre-program usage characteristic, we can identify 40% of the customers. Each dot represents 10% of customers in this program ranked by their summer peak usage. And we can see that 40% of these projects, you know, more than 1,000 projects, basically delivered no savings, actually had negative avoided costs because there was an increase in consumption during the summer peak when the utility costs are the highest, and actually drove increased CO2 emissions because when these customers used more energy also happened to be when the grid was dirtiest. So here are 40% of projects, you know, more than 1,000 customers who are getting a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 incentive funded by the ratepayers to participate in this program that we know ahead of time are not going to save anything. and they're putting in $15,000 of their own money to get their house retrofit. That is not a good value proposition. Meanwhile, we have 60% of the customers who we can identify ahead of time, who saved a heck of a lot of energy, drove a high depth of savings, had enormous avoided costs, very cost effective, and drove more than 116,000 tons of avoided CO2 emissions. That's the name of the game. So again, this is a dot that we really have to connect. We have to figure out in our programs how we can market better and how we can deliver to those customers who stand to benefit the most. And just finally, one more example. I'm just kind of showing this for fun because I got into animated figures recently, and this was a multi-day effort of labor of love to put this figure together. But this is the Eversource Home Energy Solutions program. So this is another program that's operating, in a very different part of the country, but we have similar findings. When you look at the customers with higher consumption patterns, we can find that the top roughly third of customers that are about to pop up in maroon drive about 2/3 of the savings. And then what you're seeing evolve on the bottom is the distribution of savings results over the course of what it would be like to target those customers, to eliminate the customers that have very little savings opportunity and are not going to benefit from the program, and instead focus the program where customers are most in need. And you can see how that distribution of savings evolves if we were to fill our pipeline with customers that meet these kinds of usage characteristics. You might say, well, this is tough to do, but in Eversource's service territory, there are 1.2 million residential customers, and this program serves roughly 5,000 customers a year. So again, there's plenty of opportunity out there to fill these program pipelines with customers that can drive cost-effective savings. And by the way, if they're driving cost-effective savings, then these programs can scale. It's when they can't that they have to remain small ratepayer funded programs that struggle to survive. So I want to just talk briefly about comparison groups, and I don't want to talk for too long because I want to have plenty of time for Q&A. But this is a topic I think folks will appreciate because you're a technical audience, and right now when you make a measurement of energy efficiency or any type of demand side management savings, you're doing so relative to some baseline. You have to make a prediction of what the energy usage would be in the absence of the program. But something that we're all, I'm sure, living through is the fact that COVID has changed the way that we all live our lives. Residential customers are staying home more often, commercial customers or commercial buildings are shut down because of that. And so energy usage patterns have changed dramatically, and they didn't just change and remain static, they changed and have kept evolving as we've, sort of bounced back and forth between different COVID situations and different, lockdown measures. So how do you actually adjust for this in the measurement of savings? And the answer is comparison groups. So many of you, I'm sure, have heard of comparison groups. They've been part of M&V for a long time, but COVID has brought forward a very distinct and challenging set of circumstances for continuing to make these kinds of measurements. So this has to be embedded in M&V approach now. And so what I want to say is, first of all, when you look at this top blue graph, what I'm showing is the average hourly consumption from March 1st, 2019 through August 4th, 2020. So this was like right when COVID hit. In California, the state underwent a statewide shutdown order on March 19th. So this time frame captures that date, and that date is in fact shown by the second vertical bar. And this is what's called the difference of differences calculation. So what I'm showing you is before COVID, this trace is showing us the difference between a modeled prediction of energy consumption versus the actual energy consumption on an hourly basis. And you can see that, it's not perfect. It's not just pinned to 0 the whole time. There's some model error that occurs, but generally speaking, it's hovering around 0. So we can be confident that over the course of time, if the program is making an impact, we are going to be able to capture it. We are going to be able to measure it, because the error isn't biased in one direction or another. But as soon as COVID hits, look at what happens to that calculation. It just goes totally haywire. And what ends up happening is the model dramatically over predicts energy consumption in this case, because restaurants were shutting down and using much less energy. So what we have to have in order to make a valid measurement is some ability to account for this, to understand it, and to eliminate this bias that then exists in a model-based savings calculation. So the way we do that is through a comparison group. So now I'm showing a different set, and this is just kind of a rudimentary example, but I'm showing a different set of restaurants and bars over the course of that same time frame. And then we're going to say, okay, we're going to adjust the difference, the model minus observed. That's the savings. We're going to adjust that savings for what we're observing in another group of customers. And in a real world scenario, these customers up here would also be program participants. These customers would not be program participants. So the difference then when you make that adjustment is on account of the program. And that's what we need to isolate. So comparison groups allow us to isolate that. When we actually do that here, again, these are all non-participating customers. So anything we see after this is still erroneous in a way, or it's still sort of biased. But you can see that we can effectively eliminate the vast majority of this difference. And so one of the things that we need to do is basically incorporate comparison groups into virtually every set of measurements that we do at this point. Another example on the residential side, these are customers that have a distinct load shape characteristic. They have a lower evening ramp. And then we've done some comparison group selection to find similar kinds of customers. And you can again see that a comparison group is able to effectively neutralize the vast majority of bias that would exist in a savings calculation on account of COVID, or for that matter, on account of just random hourly fluctuations. And so this is something that we did for the Department of Energy recently, and there's a report that we've published on this. I would refer anybody to this who wants to read it, but we have demonstrated the use of these comparison groups, and we're now putting them in place for a number of clients in order to, again, kind of just keep things on track for these types of programs. I want to just cover one more example, because I've talked a lot about energy efficiency, but the topic of the day is really demand flexibility. And a lot of these methods that I'm talking about, especially the hourly methods, are directly applicable in more integrated program designs. And when I hear demand flexibility, that's really what I think is integrated programs that are focused on peak load and more, not necessarily, permanent energy efficiency changes or long life cycle measures, but the integration of energy efficiency with demand response and with solar PV and with storage and EVs and everything else, time of use rates. It doesn't have to be, physical technology. It can be a behavioral, set of nudges. So this is an example of where we have a group of customers. These were from OhmConnect that participated in demand response when we had that blackout in California that I referred to earlier. And one of the things we've done recently was to get a sample of customers. We got roughly 1,200 customers on the residential side who participated in the demand response event on August 14th, that blackout day. And I'm going to show you, just kind of walk you through how we actually conduct a comparison group calculation and come up with a final savings value. So the observed energy consumption for these customers on that day, this is an average daily load shape. So we're just averaging across these 1,200 customers, is shown in these open circles. So you can see that when the event period hits, which is indicated by this light gray area, there's an obvious decrease in energy consumption, and then they come back up after the event. And when we look at the model prediction, that's shown in this dotted blue line. So this dotted blue line is telling us, well, without the program, this is what we anticipated these customers would be doing. Now, you could sort of stop here, but I just talked quite a bit about why we need a comparison group as well. So we took a group of non-participating customers and we did the same exact measurement. And we found that in that case, we did see a bit of still a bit of load impact that we can then adjust for, because the treatment group customers here, aren't in isolation. They're experiencing things that some of these customers may also be experiencing on a more market-wide basis. In this case, COVID isn't that big of a deal because we're just looking at one day. In energy efficiency, COVID's a very big deal because you're looking over a long time period. But over the course of just one day, you still have customers that are in the middle of a heat wave and may be responding to other signals, not necessarily like event-driven demand response. So we made the adjustment and we came up with a net impact value, and we found that the average customer was saving about 19% during peak. And when you have these kinds of numbers with open source code, so all of this is open source code, it's Caltrack and it's grid meter, like I mentioned, for comparison group sampling, then you can say, this is a number that was produced. You can backtrack all the calculations. This is a standardized approach. And if we can shake hands on this kind of thing, then we can say with confidence to grid operators, to utilities, to procurement planners, that this is what this program is capable of delivering. We can forecast these kinds of things for the future. So I'll just end on, I just have one last slide here, and it's just to say that one of the things we're very excited about is, and kind of like the vision for the future, for us at least, is to try to, with some of these open source tools, facilitate genuine markets. So one of the people we've been working closest with is MCE, and that's, I think they're Marin Clean Energy, but they're actually just MCE is their actual name. And we've been close partners with them for a while. They have been very interested in using some of their own funding in order to create virtual power plant incentives. So what does this mean? It means that they are looking to inspire the market to focus on peak load, and they're willing to pay on peak load management, basically. So they don't care if it's energy efficiency or if it's demand response or if it's load shifting or any other kind of behavioral strategy or whatever it may be. What they're interested in is vendors that can come into this space, say, I have a solution, and then to work with us to target customers like I talked about earlier and measure the load shifting or load changes that occur on an hourly basis as a result of this program. And they're really focused on peak load because that's when the grid constraints occur. That's when the grid needs, decarbonization the most. And then by making a market out of it with pay for performance, with elements of pay for performance and of customer targeting and everything that we've talked about today, and by just taking the chains off and saying, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be energy efficiency. It can be anything that you want to bring to the table. So we're hoping that this concept can engender some partners and really take off, and that this is the kind of model that can be taken across the country as a market-driven, scalable, demonstrable resource to decarbonize. And I'll just leave you with some references. I've already sent these slides on to Nishant. And if you are interested in these code bases, there's Caltrack, Grid Meter, Flex Value, like I mentioned, or just are more interested in this space in general, pay for performance. There's quite a bit on our website. Or if you want to really dig in and learn more about customer targeting, there's some references for you with research that we've done over the years. Some of this dates back to my time at PG&E. And with that, I'm happy to stop and answer any questions that folks may have.
Thanks, Adam. Fantastic presentation. Lot of interesting concepts in there, and I do think will inspire a number of questions here. I would ask the group to start off, at least, if you can put questions in the chat box. You can chat them directly to me, and I will convey them to Adam just to kind of keep things organized. Maybe I'll start off just to kick us off, Adam. So toward the end there, we got back to the topic of flexibility, which, at least as I understand it, is distinct from just efficiency. And earlier in the presentation, you'd given kind of a list of what some of the characteristics of a successful pay for performance program might look like for efficiency. I was wondering if you could touch a little bit on if there's any changes to that list, or what other things might be considered when you're looking more for the flexibility, especially for the flexibility. Like, one thing that comes to mind is, are there advantages for when demand response type efforts are voluntary versus, implementer or utility controlled or something like that? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things I would say just right away is I would maybe add one thing to that list for flexibility specifically, but there's already some motivation to do this in the efficiency world, but I would be very explicit that flexibility has to focus on grid needs, right? That's the point of flexibility. There's no point in shifting load around if there's not actually a need to do it, either for decarbonization or for resiliency on the grid. So to me, the distinction between efficiency and flexibility is flexibility oftentimes should be even more focused on shorter term grid needs, as opposed to sort of longer term efficiency savings that ultimately are also needed, because we can't take our eye off that long term ball. But that's one thing I would add for flexibility. Now, so you had another part of that question as well, and I'm trying to wrap my head around exactly what it was. Can you remind me the second part of your question?
Yeah, it was relative to, when I think of demand response, I kind of categorize it into two bins. One that's like voluntary versus what I think maybe we'll start to see more of is actually like utility control or implementer control or vendor controlled of, say, like a hot water heater or whatever the case may be. And just kind of curious if you have any insights into the effectiveness of those approaches.
Yeah, good question. So this, I think, is a topic that's only going to grow in importance and maybe even controversy over time. I think that the way that demand response has been playing out in California, at least, is it's become the subject of quite a bit of consternation, actually. And the reason is because of these blackout events that occurred on the grid in August of last year that I keep referring to. It's very, I would say, hot debate, like what the impact of those demand response resources actually were on the grid. And the answer oftentimes depends on exactly how you're measuring the resource. So there are a number of different methods that are brought to bear on measuring demand response. And that's true, I think, regardless of whether it's like an event-driven thing or if it's more of like an economic management kind of thing, depending on like what specifically the demand response program, like the rules of the road for that specific demand response program. But at the end of the day, either approach is sort of subject to how they're being measured. And one of the things that, it's not just us, it's a commission was actually formed a few years ago to determine what are the best kinds of measurement techniques for demand response. And when you only have participant data available to you, then you can't do comparison groups. But it's, we've seen this, but others have seen it as well, that when you actually have comparison group data available, then you can make a much more reliable and accurate measurement of the hourly impacts from demand response. And importantly, models are not perfect, right? Caltrac's not perfect. No model is perfect. What a comparison group allows you to do is, number one, look at like the exogenous effects that are going on. So if something is happening to the broader population of customers, you can account for that, and you can take that you can isolate that, you can remove it from the savings calculation. That's sort of the purpose everybody thinks about with respect to comparison groups. But another big important thing of comparison groups is that the comparison group customers, if you've done a good job, are oftentimes going to have the same model issues that the participating customers are going to have. Like as an example, a model may struggle when you get to very, very hot days because the model is built on all of the rest of the year when it's not that hot. So what does the model do when it doesn't have any, information to train on from the hottest days of the year? Those hottest days of the year are also when you have demand response events. So the model may not be perfect, but the comparison group is going to experience that imperfection in the same kind of way that the treatment group will. So you can also remove modeling issues from your measurement. So anyway, that's one example of why, or that's hopefully that answers your question at least a little bit with respect to some of these different kinds of demand response programs and the challenges they're facing.
It does. Thank you. Someone had a question here when thinking about SMUD in particular. So SMUD's energy efficiency program, I believe, is starting to prioritize carbon reduction instead of just KWH. The question here is, does that hamper the type of market that Recurve is seeking to develop here?
No, not at all. And actually, that question makes me lament the fact that I didn't put in some of the slides from some of the work we've done with SMUD, because we know very well that they're focused on carbon reduction. They've made a lot of headlines, frankly, from the fact that their portfolio goals are carbon goals. And so one of the things that SMUD is very interested in is electrification for decarbonization. And I think that it's, the decarbonization at the end of the day, like I said earlier, is only possible if you can do it in an affordable kind of way. So that's where, again, demand flexibility comes in. And you have to look at when you electrify, especially things like space heating, like think about electrification of buildings. Like let's just think about the residential sector for a minute. If you electrify space heating, when is space heating most intense? Winter mornings, right? People, they set their thermostats, the heater kicks on in the morning, and 6 a.m. you can really see this. And I'm not just like speaking out of hand, like we see this in their data. Like you see a peak in energy consumption from heat pumps on the electric grid when you have a winter morning. Now, what does that mean for decarbonization? Well, at 6 a.m. in the middle of the winter, there's not a lot of renewable resources. Is SMUD prepared to have, a winter morning peak when they electrify space heating at scale? I don't know, but these are the things that they need to think about. These are the things that we need to think about. But when we looked at a lot of the greenhouse gas impacts that SMUD is going to experience over time, we see that in electrification, you have a very interesting set of circumstances, at least when you're focused on space heating, because that heat pump is obviously replacing a furnace, but it's also acting as a more efficient air conditioner. So when you look at SMUD's greenhouse gas forecast, the toughest time to decarbonize is the summer peak period when people are using a lot of air conditioning. So over time, you see that the heat pump adds carbon to the electric grid. Obviously, it's removing gas consumption, so you're getting carbon savings from the gas side, but you're adding carbon to the electric grid during the times when that heat pump is, heating. But when it's in cooling mode, it's a more efficient air conditioner. So in the summer, you're actually saving carbon. And then over time, because the grid is decarbonizing faster or more completely outside of that summer peak period, you actually see that the heat pump itself, even though on net, it's adding megawatt hours to the grid, it's actually a decarbonization resource on an electric basis alone, even ignoring the gas, because it's a more efficient air conditioner. So, there's just more than meets the eye here with respect to electrification. It's not a silver bullet. You need demand flexibility to go along with it. And you need to be prepared for a very, very different load shape on the electric grid, especially over the course of different seasons. So procurement planners are going to have to plan for this. As we collectively think about decarbonization, we're going to have to just know what's coming at us. You know, are we prepared to decarbonize a winter peak?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, the implications of considering these programs on a carbon basis as opposed to just kWh. There's a lot to consider there. We had a question from Bobby about the large magnitude of the solar that's curtailed in California. Just maybe what are general thoughts? Have you heard of any attempts to use that energy? What can we do about that issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue ultimately has to be solved by a combination of things. I mean, I think it has to be an all hands on deck type of approach. Obviously, storage, we're all hoping that storage can scale and can become something that you know, can capture those extra electrons. Demand flexibility, load shifting, that kind of stuff, you know, flattening the duck curve. And these aren't magic words. These are things that are going to require a heck of a lot of work. You know, we need customers to pay more attention. We need more innovative programs. We need more dollars in this space. We need, you know, we're just trying to play our small part in all of this. But I think that unless we can get on top of these problems sooner rather than later, then we're going to see increased curtailment. Now, a lot of people I think in this space are starting to ask the question, does curtailment really matter? Like, do we really care? You know, we curtailed 1.6 terawatt hours of electricity in 2020, but PG&E alone, just look at PG&E alone, you know, their annual consumption is about 80 terawatt hours. So, you know, you're on the order of say 2% or 1. You know, I don't do the maybe 1.8% of just PG&E's load. Maybe across the state, it's less than 1% when you bring in SDG&E and SCE. So it's not like an economic catastrophe to curtail 1.6 terawatt hours, but it's more a harbinger of like what problems we're going to be facing. Because right now, so without storage, how do you decarbonize overnight? How do you decarbonize, you know, winter morning peak, like I just talked about with respect to electrification? We've got to find a way to, you know, demand flexibility still has to be part of that solution, regardless of whether we're curtailing or not. But the fact that we are curtailing 1.6 terawatt hours a year is more of a warning sign to me than it is like itself an economic disaster.
Makes sense. How do you see the incoming new loads, you know, from electrification? We've talked a little bit about the heat pumps, for example, but EVs are another one, electric bus fleets. How will that affect pay for performance methods?
This is a good question, because I really don't know the answer to that, honestly. I think EVs are fairly difficult because they're so unpredictable. Solar, if you look at solar PV, you know when the sun is shining. Like you know that if the sun is shining, that you're going to have solar PV output. Now, that doesn't make it easy, but it makes it predictable and modelable. EVs, you know, you don't necessarily know when somebody's going to come home and plug in their EV. You hope it aligns with EV rates. And by the way, you hope those EV rates are aligned with when the grid is the least carbon intensive, which right now they really don't. You know, the EV rates are actually overnight when the grid has plenty of, you know, marginal natural gas consumption. But customer behavior becomes a big component of measurement of EV that is unpredictable. The best thing I can say is, you know, I'm a big believer that things have to be measurable, so we've got to solve this problem. And that when you have big portfolios, that helps a lot. So if you have big portfolios, all of a sudden things that on an individual basis are very unpredictable, on a portfolio level, they're very predictable and they're very well behaved. So I think, you know, the nice thing about EVs is hopefully if things go well, we're going to have millions and millions of EVs on the grid, and it becomes a much more, you know, portfolio level like management problem. And that's where the risk belongs. You know, one of the things I didn't get to today, I mentioned it a little bit, but it's where does risk belong in a demand flexibility program? Well, risk does not belong on an individual customer, because you never know if factors that are outside the program's control on an individual customer basis are going to ultimately result in an increase in consumption. So if you go to that customer on an individual basis and say, your incentive is dependent on saving energy, but they just had a kid or whatever it is, you know, then they don't get an incentive, and then what? They just bought all this, you know, energy efficiency equipment or whatever it is. So the risk belongs at an aggregated level. So it either belongs at an implementer level or a utility level. You know, that's where the risk belongs. And with respect to EVs, if we can aggregate projects, then we'll still be able collectively to measure portfolios that are well behaved.
Got it. Tim, you want to go?
Adam, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. When we talk about customer targeting and consumer groups, it seems to me that we all have here in PG&E territory smart meters. We're moving towards a smart grid. Aren't we just one step away from this all turning into the solution being the application of artificial intelligence, wherein the meters and the grid sends me a text and asks me to curtail or plug in my EV or do whatever it's going to take to stabilize the grid. That's created a market because then it makes a deposit under that pay for performance model into my Venmo account.
Yeah, Tim, good. I mean, I would say that's just a good observation. I mean, I tend to agree with you. You know, I think we may very well end up in a scenario like that. But hopefully one of the things that sort of gets us there is actually thinking about customer targeting and where the opportunities are. It may very well be that, you know, artificial intelligence or like machine learning applications can get us to the point where we have an optimized set of price signals or engagement, you know, strategies for customers where we can just engage them on their smartphones or the even better, the systems are all just automated and we can, you know, tune that refrigerator down or turn that thermostat up or whatever it may be. But at the, you know, at least for the time being, there's a heck of a lot of energy efficiency programs out there that are struggling with cost effectiveness and that could very well be cost effective and could scale if they would be more specific about the customers they're recruiting. And so, you know, until we're in that set of circumstances where, you know, things are very, very automated and customers are engaged because they don't have to be engaged, you know, then I think there's a real need to get on top of this problem. You know, at PG&E, I lived firsthand a reduction in the energy efficiency budget. And that was very difficult. You know, we were shutting down programs, we were reducing program budgets. And a huge reason was we were not able to demonstrate that we had a cost-effective portfolio. And again, this is at a time when the California legislature and the governor signed into law SB 350 that mandated a doubling of energy efficiency if the programs were cost-effective, right? Like that's the clause in the law that ultimately has led to a hundreds of millions of dollars being taken out of the energy efficiency portfolio at a time when, you know, we really should be scaling up the resource. So if we can get to the point through meter-based approaches and targeting where people can have successful pay for performance portfolios that are cost effective, then I think there's a real appetite out there to scale up those kinds of programs and really get energy efficiency and demand flexibility or whatever it may be to the table in a way that can compete. You know, people are hungry for that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. As you were talking about the results that came in from that residential incentive program, was thinking, well, why couldn't they target potential customers for those programs based on their energy use profiles? That the utility company has my data. Why can't they knocking at my door or my neighbor's door and finding the customers that are going to be most can benefit most from these kind of programs?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, this is something that it's something I've been very passionate about for a long time. And I've learned some hard lessons. We did customer targeting somewhat successfully, somewhat unsuccessfully at PG&E. One of the things that we learned by trying was actually through some of our programs to provide targeted customer lists to contractors with a bonus for any customer that they pulled in off of that targeted list. And the list was developed based on customer usage characteristics that we found through our research were high savings potential customers. And what ultimately happened was, what we didn't realize at the time was it wasn't that simple. The implementers themselves, because they had over the course of many years structured their programs to maximize deemed incentives, had a group of contractors that would knock on every door, like quite literally knock on every door, and then deliver the same exact measures at every single household. So it shouldn't be a big surprise that when you actually look at the meter-based performance of a portfolio like that, you have a whole bunch of customers who don't save anything because they never had an opportunity to save. You provide an air conditioning tune-up for a customer that's not using their air conditioner, you're not going to save much. But if it's free to them, why not? So it was literally a knock on every door approach and the same set of measures for every customer. And so what we're trying to do is to say, look, we really have to get to the point where we provide the right incentive structures through these programs that rewards the right kind of business model. And so it's really marketing, it's business models. Like what we're trying to do is say this, we should feel compelled to do this because this is the ticket to successful programs that can scale instead of fighting over smaller and smaller pieces of like a diminishing pie.
Excellent. Thank you.
There's a question from Isaac here, but I want to make sure we get to, but I want to tag on to Tim's for just a second to ask maybe the flip side of the coin of targeting customers. Are there any concerns that get discussed about equity as far as, the opportunity of customers who maybe their load profiles don't make them the best candidates, but who are still paying into these programs and, ought to have access to them? How does that factor in? Does that get considered at all?
Yeah, to me, targeting has always been about finding the right programs for the right customer and not about excluding anybody. At the end of the day, the participating customers are oftentimes the focus of equity considerations. But we have to remember that these programs are all being funded by the broader rate base. And the promise of these programs is to deliver a cost-effective resources that can actually reduce the burden on all ratepayers. So we're certainly not doing that if our programs are serving customers that don't have an opportunity to save in the first place, or we're not maximizing the output of these programs. That's sort of point number one. Point number two is that for a lot of these programs, it's not funded exclusively by the broader rate base through utility bill surcharges. Participating customers are investing their own money, right? So when we talk about the Advanced Home Upgrade Program as an example, those customers on average are putting forward $12,000 or $15,000 of their own money in addition to that $3,000 or $5,000 incentive to participate in that program. Now, is it very customer friendly to say to somebody who doesn't have a real opportunity for savings to put $15,000 of their own money toward an energy efficiency program? I would say no. So I think that there's both a non-participant and a participant consideration that actually showcases how customer targeting is very friendly and should be considered a best practice. And then, the last thing I would say is there's a real need for equity in energy efficiency. It's not to deny that, but equity should be its own focus. And programs that, our programs right now are serving 1-2% of customers. Most programs are like that. You have like the home energy reports that are serving, a huge range of customers. But a lot of energy efficiency programs, they're serving 1 or 2% of the customers. And those include the lower income programs, or like the equity focused programs. So I think we have every need to focus on equity, but it should be deliberate. It shouldn't be through it shouldn't be through restricting programs from optimizing themselves by finding the customers who actually need it the most.
Makes sense. Okay, last question here from Isaac. So how do you see limitation of communications for assets behind the meter potentially hampering the efficacy of distributed energy resource flexibility? So an example being using home Wi-Fi, I think, to control a battery as an example. Have you seen initial data?
Feel free to clarify if I am answering sort of the wrong question here, but I would say I'm enthusiastic and optimistic about these kinds of things. I definitely don't consider myself like a reliable prognosticator necessarily, but I think there's, this almost gets to like Tim's point of can there be a higher degree of automation around demand flexibility that can reduce the sort of uncertainty around like demand response events, or can we just be constantly like tweaking and managing a grid via AI or something like that with these kinds of internet driven like IoT kinds of solutions? I mean, I definitely hope so. I think that there's a lot of other innovators in this field. There's a whole bunch of companies I'm thinking of. I've already mentioned OhmConnect. There's like packetized energy. There's these companies that are putting smart devices on water heaters. Water heaters, like who's up at night like worried about their water heater? Nobody, right? Nobody ever thinks about their water heater unless they've got cold water when they don't want it. So there's refrigerators. There's a real opportunity here for these kinds of things to be just permanent load management, like intelligence driven. And we absolutely should be following the path. I am also a big fan, by the way, of just straight up energy efficiency. Like there's a real need to just get a bunch of these old refrigerators off the grid, because when you're talking about decarbonization, it's not just about demand flexibility. It's about solving like it's about permanent load reduction where there's a dirty grid. So we talked about a minute about low income programs. I have been begging anybody who will listen to me for a long time to have a low income refrigeration program. Refrigerators oftentimes, first of all, low income customers oftentimes live in multifamily arrangements, and they have a split incentive issue. So if you're familiar with the split incentive issue, I won't go into it, but just to say, like, there is a structural element that keeps old equipment in multifamily housing. Refrigeration uses a ton of energy 24/7, including when it's hard to decarbonize. And low income customers would benefit oftentimes the most from having a refrigerator replacement. So I've been begging anybody who will listen to me to run a refrigeration program for low income customers and just make it direct install. Get into these old apartment buildings, get rid of those old refrigerators, install new efficient equipment. Like this doesn't have to be sexy all the time. This can be boots on the ground. We just got to get the work done. So I'll leave you with that. I hope that, on that note, hopefully this has been a good talk for everybody, and at least somewhat enlightening.
Well, thanks so much, Adam. Like your presentation was wonderful. Thanks for taking time for the Q&A as well. And like the comments, the closing comments, we have the mind and the heart at the right place. Yeah, together all of us will make it happen. So thanks again. I'll also leave a plug for maybe our next month's event. So as you see, the Texas grade failure. It is coming in almost all the publications, which is there. So yeah, here at NorCal chapter, we are going to have a demystifying event of the Texas grade failure. Also, probably reflect something on the grade failure 6 months earlier to that here in California. So yeah, we will have Wade Shaw from Wood Mackenzie. He's the research director over there. And with that, like, I'll invite you all to attend that event. Thanks so much. And thanks for attending this event. All right. Take care, folks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam.